Welcome to Stone Cold Stros. I am Brandon Strange with Charlie Palillo and Josh Jordan. Follow them on X at Palillo and at Josh Jordan 975 and read their work on sportsmap.com. On today's episode, Bregman's been homeless so long, I hear Will Smith's going to play him in a movie. The farm to table pipeline has Houston for hunger, and we've got reports that the Mavericks just traded Anthony Davis to the Astros for Jeff Bagwell's statue. Before we get into that, just a reminder to please click like on the video if you want to see more offseason content. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Be sure to click the bell for notifications so you know as soon as new content drops. And if you're on the go, we're on all your favorite podcast apps like Apple and Spotify. Just search Stone Cold Stros. Gents, Week 14 of Bregman Watch rolls on. Nothing substantive on that front, and I think Astros fans in particular were grateful for the Luka news over the weekend to distract them from the Breg-Teague we all feel, as coined by Charlie. So I'll just tee it up to you guys. Anything in the news Bregman related you guys want to talk about or you saw that you found interesting?
I think it's largely the same idle gossip. So I will defer, adding that pitchers and catchers report next week. So Breggy, no Breggy, Sturm and Drang and drama, Scott Boris's name ever again being uttered around here. It's all good. It's all good. The doors are open in West Palm next week.
It is. I just had a couple quick notes. Nothing that's going to change life or anything like that. But there were a few things that I paid attention to. I'm seeing more reports that Boston is staying firm at 4 years with Bregman. So that seems to be where they're at. The Tigers, we thought after they brought back Flaherty that maybe they would be out of the mix for Bregman, but we're seeing reports that's not necessarily the case. So the Tigers could still be in the mix for Alex. We're also seeing that the Bregman, he wants the 6 years. He's holding firm to that, but he also doesn't want to take a salary decrease. So I think that's where he's going to have a lot of trouble, to where he doesn't want to take a pay cut, but he also wants a 6-year deal. So unless maybe the Astros front load the deal and make the last few years of the deal a little less, maybe they can kind of accomplish that. But I don't think the total is going to change at all. And that was my final note here from Bagwell. Jeff Bagwell spoke over the weekend and kind of talked about the offseason. And he said, we gave him our best offer. He can go shop it as far as Breggy. So I think it's what we thought. The Astros offer is the offer. Maybe they could change, how many million in this year as opposed to that year. But I think the total years and the total money, I think that's the offer there. So I thought that was interesting that Bregman or Bagwell said, we gave him our best offer. Jim Crane's like, how much are you paying at that, Jeff? But okay. So I think that's kind of where we stand here. We're just going to have to wait and see what develops.
Josh, you picked the scab. Now I'll follow with a couple quick points. All it takes is one fool, right? And that's the game that Scott Boras is trying to extend. It would be fun on one level and interesting. I don't think really it's how it should go, but this is not an auction, right, where the bids are out there. Boras will lie through his teeth, which, if you want to question the ethics of it, as opposed to, hey, it's all negotiation, baby. No one knows exactly what the Tigers have offered the Red Sox. The Astros 6-156 has been offed and now lengthily reported. But Boras is going to try to play them all off of one another, try to lure in that one team as late as he can, if that's how it takes. But as we discussed last week, if I'm the Astros, I'm not offering 6 years now. It's not the market out there. Any team giving Bregman 6 years where he could opt out after the first year is a complete moron. And it's disingenuous for Boras to say, Team Bregman to say, $28.5 million, that's what we made last year. That's how the contract was structured. It was a 5-year, $100 million deal. That's $20 million per. If you don't want your salary to decline, then perhaps your performance should not have declined over the last 2 years. You're going to be aging into your mid-30s during this contract. Alex Bregman, let's be fair, we've not heard anything from him suggesting, hey, a pity party, because maybe no one out there is offering more than 4 years, $110 million. But at some point, just accept the reality of the situation. And I'm now to the point where if I'm the Astros, I'm hoping some other team does something really stupid and takes the Bregman issue off of their plate. Because with Christian Walker signed for 3 years, and Paredes under control for 3 years, and Altuve starting a 5-year extension, unless none of the Astros prospects are going to amount to anything, starting with Bryce Matthews, who's supposed to be a shortstop or maybe a third baseman. Who the hell wants to commit to 6 years of Alex Bregman at superstar money at this point? The Tigers, remember, when they beat the Astros in the wild card series, their entire 26-man player payroll was lower than Justin Verlander's 2024 salary. So even with the Tigers committing $25 million to Jack Flaherty to bring him back for this coming season, their payroll is still about $70 million lower than where the Astros are for 2025. So if the Tigers choose to splurge, it's not bringing with it tax ramifications the way it does for the Astros, as well as the unseemly or awkward roster fits it would create for the Astros, starting with Jose Altuve, primary left fielder.
Yeah, the Cubs, they're the ones I'm kind of hearing with this opt-out thing that Charlie was mentioning, that there might be a team that has a lengthy deal on the table, but with an opt-out after year one. There's some reports that maybe that's Chicago because they want an opportunity to make a run at Kyle Tucker and pay him all that money. And Bregman's contract may prevent them from doing so. Something they kind of dealt with Bellinger if Bregman was to opt back in next year, and it could hamstring them a little bit. But these are all just reports. But we are hearing that, from Heyman, a lot of people, that the Cubs are really interested in Bregman. At least maybe Boris is drumming that up, but we keep hearing that.
How much do you guys think pride is factoring into the stalemate that we're witnessing right now? Because on the Astros side, Crane's dug in. He doesn't want to set a precedent of bidding against himself. On the other side, Bregman's waited this entire time with the exact same offer that's on the table. He probably feels like he's going to have a lot of egg on his face. We hear a lot in the news cycle about the cost of eggs. This guy's going to be wearing a whole omelet on his face when it's all said and done. So how much of this is also just dudes being prideful right now?
I think clearly it's part of it. I think foremost for Scott Boras, this is blood sport, but he knows the scoreboard is every deal he gets, every new standard that he shatters. And I'm not blaming him for playing to win, but you're not going to win every hand, every game. And from Jim Crane's perspective, aren't you in part playing yourself for a fool? If you go Bregman 6 years, 156, heaven forbid, actually sweeten the offer to smooth over any hard feelings. Give me a freaking break on that. But you're going 6 years for Bregman at 156 that takes him through his age 36 season, a zero-time All-Star the last 5 years, a guy who 4 consecutive seasons has been a lesser player than Kyle Tucker. But heavens to Murgatroyds, we can't do 7 or 8 years for Kyle Tucker because that's just too long. It would take Tucker all the way to age 34. Had you done 8 years with him going into last season. But now you're willing to go 6 years? If you're indeed truly willing to go there on Bregman, it just fundamentally doesn't make sense.
Right. I think pride's part of it, Brandon. I think also Pete Alonso, maybe once that domino falls, we'll see some movement in the market. I think that might be part of it. But, Bregman can kind of sit here and wait. And at the end of the day, he paid Boris to get him as much money as he could. So that's what Boris is trying to do.
Just a few hours after our last episode premiered, Jorge Polanco signed an extension with Seattle, much to the chagrin of Mariners fans, actually. Charlie, you and I were texting right after the news broke, and I told you I'm almost more grateful for the moves that haven't happened this offseason than the ones that have, specifically looking at you, Nolan Arenado. We did get news of Jack Flaherty signing back with Detroit. Josh hit on that. And I've seen speculation on both sides of that. I'm sure Scott Boras wants to make sure that everyone knows that Bregman's still in Detroit. Bleacher Report gave Houston a D for their offseason grade. It's pretty weird to give a grade before the test is over, but maybe that's part of this new Common Core math I hear a lot about. So anything from the news cycle you guys want to react to? Are you buying Houston getting a D for its offseason grade right now?
Well, given the standards of the last 8 years here, and that the Astros obviously have gotten worse this offseason. Kikuchi out, Wisniewski in. That's the net in their starting rotation. Presley out, nobody in for their bullpen. And their best everyday player for the time that he played last season, right? Kyle Tucker playing half the season, had a higher WAR than Bregman or Jordan or Altuve. And we know the circumstances through which he was dealt. But for the 2025 Astros, you can't call this a good offseason. Though, should Bregman come back, the length of the contract, the dollars, the long-term repercussions of it could be very troubling. It would make the 2025 Astros better because right now, Dubon, DeCenzo, and anything else, speaking of Ds, that's where all your ABs would be going in left field. Unless DeCenzo or someone else is playing second base because they're hell-bent on getting Altuve's deteriorated defense out of the infield and shoehorning him into left field.
I'm going to have to kind of agree with their assessment because Dana Brown said bringing Bregman back is a long shot. So until that proves otherwise, I'm going to consider that a notable loss. They list it here in the article. Loss: Kyle Tucker, Justin Verlander, Kikuchi, Ryan Presley, Caleb Ferguson. But then Alex Bregman, you add all those names together and you only added Walker, Paredes, and Wisniewski. Yeah, this team took a step back. It doesn't mean they won't make the playoffs, but if you're just looking at the offseason, that is a lot of talent that went out the door. And I mean, Paredes, I'm excited for him with the Crawford boxes, the way he pulls the ball, but he has been traded a couple times recently, and some of the advanced analytics aren't great for him. It appears he's a really good fit for the Astros ballpark. Hopefully that'll be the case. But yeah, just look what walked out the door. They're not going to be as good this year, but like I said, doesn't mean they won't win the division.
Play the course. If the Astros are a D, the Seattle Mariners are an F. I mean, skin flinty as they are, they give $7.75 million guaranteed to bring back Polanco off hitting .213, and they're going to move him to third base now. What you think of as a more offensive position, that's highly offensive to Mariners fans, and they've done nothing else to boost their meager offense. The Rangers with a couple of interesting moves. Jock Peterson could be a platoon masher for them. Questions all over their starting rotation. Their bullpen still is down its two best guys from last year. Kirby Yates isn't walking back through that door, and who knows where David Robertson winds up. So playing the course and narrowly viewing it as the American League West foremost hadn't been a good offseason for the Astros, but it's not as if they've lost all kinds of ground to the two foremost threats within the division.
Just a quick message. If you are a business owner and you'd like us to help spread the word about your service or product, you can contact our friends on the sales team at houston.sportsmap.com/advertise. The link is in our description. Thanks.
I wanted to hit on Polanco real quick, Brandon,
sure.
before we move on. I thought it was really interesting that a lot of the reports that they did add Polanco were that, I think they thought that the contract that they would give him would keep them under the first competitive balance tax. Polanco, I think, got a little more than they were expecting from Seattle, so they were out. But what was really interesting to me was, Chandler Rome saying the plan would have been for Polanco to play the infield and for Altuve to move to the outfield. So we talked about this before the show, Brandon, that when Dana Brown said they would only move Altuve if they acquired somebody, I was thinking he only meant Bregman because he wasn't, mentioning specific names. But apparently that wasn't the case, that if Polanco would have been here, he would have been in the. I thought they may have moved him to the outfield, but according to Chandler Rome, no, that wasn't the plan. And then we also heard over the weekend Craig Biggio being asked about Altuve moving to the outfield, and from his experience, what does he think? And he thought he'd be able to do it. So this is something clearly they are talking about, and it looks like Altuve, if he can get this down in spring training, I think he's going to play the outfield a fair amount.
Further crystallizes how the Astros view what all the metrics indicate, how badly Altuve's defense has deteriorated at second base. Polanco was about the only guy with worse defensive metrics at second base, actually, last season than Altuve. But they're going to play Polanco at second, move Altuve to left. Absolutely, Josh. The Astros are hoping for a cheap bet on Polanco for a bounce back coming off the patellar operation, that he'd get back to close to being the guy he was most recently in 2021. We'll never know, at least not in Houston.
Well, I mean, it does make a little sense, though. I don't necessarily know that you want to have a guy coming back from a patellar tendon surgery to be running around in the outfield. So I don't know, but I agree with you. It's starting to feel a little uncomfortable. And the reason why that we're hanging on every update and move this offseason is because that's basically where the help's going to come in. There doesn't look like there's any help coming from within. And that's because Houston's farm system just does not lend itself to much optimism these days. Case in point was Keith Law just released his top. He ranked the MLB farm systems, and then he released his top 100 prospects. Houston has one player on the list, and that's Cam Smith, the guy they just got in the Cubs trade for Kyle Tucker. He's number 43. That's it. They have one player listed there. Law ranks Houston's farm system as 29 of 30. An interesting note that got our attention was that the Braves are ranked 28, right above Houston. Why that mattered is because Jim Crane hired Dana Brown from the Braves to help rebuild this farm system. So, guys, how concerning is the state of Houston's farm system? And then what correlations do you draw between Dana Brown and the farm system he left in Atlanta?
Well, the state of the Astros farm system is a massive problem. And for anyone thinking, well, Keith Law just hates the Astros ever since the cheating, ESPN ranked the Astros system 30th out of 30. So Keith Law has a scintilla of Astros fandom in him, I guess. The state of it is what it is. There's just very little high ceiling stuff. Even the guys who are considered the Astros top prospects, we want to take Jacob Melton. He wouldn't be one of Seattle's 3 or 4 top prospects. Jacob Melton's already 24 years old, but as we were talking about Polanco, Altuve, someone in left field, Jacob Melton's an actual outfielder who can run and, unlike Jake Myers, Chas McCormick, purportedly actually throw. I mean, he should be getting every opportunity. Oh, by the way, if he can do anything with it, he bats left-handed. Another glaring need in the Astros lineup. But Bryce Matthews, Dana Brown's first-round pick, right? He turns 23 early this season. There are plenty of exceptions. There are more than 20,000 big league players in history. But, most guys who are going to go on to be real stars, they're in the big leagues by the time they're 23. I mean, you go back in Astros history all the way to Joe Morgan and Cesar Cedeno, and then you come into guys like Bagwell and Biggio, and more recently, Altuve and Bregman and Correa. Right? Springer didn't make it until 24 because the Astros kind of hosed George Springer. Roy Oswalt didn't make it until he was 23 because he was a 23rd round draft choice. Lance Berkman didn't get up until he was 23. In part, the Astros made a mistake. Lance Berkman was a freaking machine offensively. But Lance Berkman was also held down by the 1998 Astros, who were tremendous and had Derek Bell, for those who remember the name, having a terrific year, and Carl Everett having a terrific year, and Moises Alou having an MVP caliber. That was the outfield. So there was no spot for Lance Berkman until one season later. Melton's already 24 years old. Matthews will be 23 years old. They need someone to make a big outburst and leap to bring some quality, exciting, and, oh, by the way, cheap talent to the Major League roster for 2025 and moving ahead. And quickly on the tie-in on the Braves, I'm not worried about it, right? This is Dana Brown's 3rd year now with the Astros. During his tenure with Atlanta, they graduated so many guys, from Ozzie Albies and Spencer Strider, and Spencer Schwellenbach came into their system while Dana was over there, and Ronald Acuna Jr. So Brown's tenure in player development with Atlanta rightfully was the linchpin in him getting the job here. His player development results with the Astros, the clock's starting to tick.
It is, and I think Dana's trying to speed up this process by drafting a guy like Matthews that was a college player. I believe he played at Nebraska. Typically, those guys maybe get to the big leagues a little bit quicker. Also, Walker Janik, the catcher they took, he was out of Sam Houston, another college player. So I think they're trying to jumpstart this and get these guys to the big leagues as quick as they can. It's just this stuff takes some time, and I'm not too worried. Sure, I'd love them to have a filled up, great farm system, but it's been bad for years, and the Astros still keep managing to make the playoffs. It's just how much longer can they maintain that? And will they finally get some of these guys that they've drafted to step up and become difference makers for the team, even just something decent? And they tried last year with Whitcomb and DeCenzo. Dana said he has no problem giving young guys an opportunity, but it just didn't work out last year. Hopefully, maybe we see something this year from some of the other guys in camp. Maybe they push each other, but I just think it's important they get that extra bat in the lineup. I see why they're trying so hard to get Altuve out into the outfield, because if you could somehow bring back Bregman, then you really got a longer batting order. And at the end of the year, you couldn't score any runs against Detroit in the playoffs. They had a lot of trouble scoring runs. That's the weakness on this team. So it would be nice if they got that one extra bat.
And the thing is, with the guys that they gave a shot and pushed to the major leagues, none of them were premium prospects, and none of them were young. DeCenzo's 25 years old. Whitcomb's 26 years old. Loperfido's 25 years old. Pedro Leon is 26 years old. Not one young guy ramrodding his way to the major leagues because, wow, this guy's just electric. And it's not like it's a lineup devoid of spots where they can use some help. So, if Bryce Matthews is gangbusters at spring training, but he was a strikeout machine in the minors. And I don't make a big deal out of the Puerto Rican Winter League, but while they're raving about what DeCenzo did in 60 at-bats there, Matthews was awful there. And if you're not producing some young, cheap talent, it becomes prohibitively expensive to keep a roster together, or maybe you step out to sign guys to try to keep the train moving. And that's in part how you wind up stuck with Jose Abreu contracts and Rafael Montero contracts. And then just misfortune kicks in with a guy like Christian Javier blowing out his arm. And McCullough is always blowing out his arm.
Yeah, and it was an interesting write-up on the farm rankings from Law. The first sentence of the summary for Houston attributes the state of the farm system to years of not very good drafts, his words. On the other hand, he starts Atlanta's blurb by stating that the Braves system is down from years of contention and trading away draft prospects, as if that's not the exact scenario that Houston's been in, and quite frankly, been a little more successful at as far as the contention part. And also done it without 2 years of top draft picks due to the sign stealing scandal, which he neglects to mention. Now, I know Keith Law doesn't necessarily get a lot of love from the Houston fan base, but there's also, if you look at the Athletic conducting their annual survey of executives from all 30 teams, they ask questions like which organization has the better farm system, which one drafts better. And neither Houston or Atlanta received votes in those two questions. It was also funny on Law's write-up, too. He mentions that Loperfido was a solid prospect. So either he's more bullish on Joey than we are, or Joey's another one of those missed draft picks. So, Charlie, you hit on something before we hit go on this podcast. You were talking about how this history of not very good drafts goes back a surprisingly long way. Give us some context around that.
Yeah, it actually traces to Jeff Luhnow, and I know he's a rightful baseball deity around here, and ultimate credit goes to the general manager who exhumed this franchise and steered it to the mountaintop. But let's remember, among their biggest core pieces, Carlos Correa, the number 1 overall pick in the draft, Alex Bregman, the number 2 overall pick in the draft. The back half of the era, Kyle Tucker, the 5th overall pick in the draft. And on the front end of it, George Springer, Jose Altuve, Dallas Keuchel, they all predated Jeff Luhnow. So it's not as if they were stripped to the studs and then below the studs, and he had to start from absolute square one and made every move that built the Astros into the monster that they became. But I made the point a few weeks back, the Astros have not drafted a good major leaguer in the first or second round, a player who became a good major since Kyle Tucker, who after the Astros took Bregman at number 2, they took Tucker at number 5 in the 2015 draft. Let me just skim through the names. 2016, first round pick Forrest Whitley. 2017, J.K. Bukauskas. 2018, Seth Beer. Good news is Bukauskas, Beer, 2 of the 3 prospects dealt to acquire Zach Greinke. But hey, get credit for making that trade and Greinke helping the Astros get back to another World Series. but you did draft guys who didn't become consequential major leaguers. The last draft, Jeff Luhnow in charge, 2019, Corey Lee. Fringe major leaguer at best at this point. 2020, 2021, no first or second round picks because of the cheating penalties. And it's a little early to condemn a player drafted 3 years ago as well. He never made it to the major leagues, but we'll see. 2022, Drew Gilbert, James Click. And then the last 2 drafts, Matthews and Yannick on Dana Brown's watch. But second round picks. And to be fair, baseball is different, right? In the NFL, you take a guy in the second round, you pretty much expect him to become an immediate starter and a very good player. In the NBA, second round picks, you're chucking darts at the board. Baseball's a little closer to that. Nevertheless, find if not the bullseye, at least something to score some points in the second round once in a while. From 2016 forward, Ronnie Dawson, Joe Perez, Jason Schroeder, Gray Kessinger. Those are the 4 final second round picks while Jeff Luhnow was the general manager. Not a lot of harvest from those.
Any final thoughts before we're out the door, Josh?
No, I think Charlie laid it out there. So they're going to have to make do with what they have, and we'll see how it shakes out spring training. This is going to be an exciting one to follow. To new look Astros. I'm excited to see what this team looks like.
Let's just throw in, again, always trying to keep the scales balanced. I mean, not that Jeremy Payne is anything approaching a star, but a good, solid major league. And for one postseason, a mega superstar. He was the 3rd round pick. Hunter Brown, a 5th round pick. The other component of developing your minor league system is the development word. And the Astros, especially with their Latin infusions, right? Framber Valdez as a crowning jewel. So it's not only about your draft, but there is nobody who thinks right now that the Astros farm system is anything other than among the weakest in the game. Some think it's the very weakest or next weakest, but anything suggesting the Astros farm system really isn't that bad right now relative to their peers, that's just spin or wishful thinking.
We'll cut it there. That's going to be it for this episode of Stone Cold Stros. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to click like on the video. And if you listen on podcasts on places like Apple or Spotify, you do us a solid by giving us a 5-star rating. Charlie, Josh, and I will see you on our next episode. We plan to drop that on Thursday, but maybe sooner. Depends on if there's any breaking news. Make sure to subscribe to this channel, Sports Map Houston, our other channel, Sports Map Texans. We'll have more content during the week and anytime news breaks. Thanks for listening. For Charlie and Josh, I'm Brandon. Until next time, go Stros.